What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and in this video, I want to talk about the art of storytelling. Now, here's an important thing when it comes to storytelling. Storytelling is really less about the story itself and like more about how you tell it, right? Like if I told you guys a story about Aaron, Sloan, and Peaches, right? Like, hey, Aaron, like a buddy of mine, Sloan, back when we were in high school, had this stuffed dog named Peaches, and he tried to get a Hooters, like a Hooters waitress's number using Peaches. That's not very interesting. I mean, it's factual, it's the core facts, but it's not very interesting. So it'd be like, okay, well, that's kind of cool, you know? But the idea of telling a story is designed, at least for me, for the purpose of like getting people excited, like getting them in. Because it's like watching magic, right? Like you watch magic not because you want to know how the trick's done, but because you don't want to know how the trick's done. You want to be tricked, like you want to be deceived, you want to be fooled, you want to think about it on your own. It's one of the reasons why the internet loves a great mystery. You guys remember the safe from back in the day on Reddit? Some guy bought a house and like he took a picture of it and he was like, in the basement of my house is like this giant safe. And for like a year, Reddit was trying to figure out what was in that safe. People were tracking down previous owners. Like people were, I mean, it was crazy. People trying to figure out what all was inside this safe. And so in that instance, like it's people who just like love a mystery. When it comes to storytelling, it's the same way. People want to be enamored. And the question is why? Well, because it really is kind of contextual based on the situation. But like in this day and age, people love a good story because it's a reprieve from what may be like a life that they live that they don't really care too much, or maybe they're just really, really bored. Whatever the case is, or maybe it's just really fun and fascinating, who knows? But whatever the basis is, the notion behind storytelling is to get people excited. So take it back to the early days of humanity, right? Like the early days of civilization. I'll tell you guys a funny story here in a minute. But in the early days of civilization, right? Like the dawn of creation, right? Like every single tribe that's ever existed in the history of humanity has at some point in its distant past had elders that gave us stories on how everything came into existence, right? Like the Bashango people of Central Africa believe that in the beginning there was darkness, water, and the great god Bamba. And Bamba was sick from a stomachache, and Bamba vomited up the sun, which dried up some of the water and left land, and then Bamba was still sick, so he vomited up the moon, the stars, and some animals, and then eventually humans. And that's how everything came into existence. But the elders that would tell that story would tell it in such a way that it was riveting. In the beginning, there was only darkness, child. All there was just this empty void. There was water, and there was the great god Bamba. And they would be told in like these epic fashions, right? You know, because it's designed to kind of instill interest, to instill intrigue, but also kind of add, you know, to add to like the grandiose nature of the story itself. Now, fast forward, and then you start getting into like epic deeds of beings who were out there, great stories of heroes like Achilles and Hercules, you know, and all, you know, so on and so forth. They're told in like spectacular and incredible fashion because they're designed to amp us up. They're designed to get us really, really excited and to by virtue of how the story is being told, showcase the greatness of that character, right? Like you tell the stories of like the 12 labors of Hercules, right? Like you tell that story and it's just kind of like, yeah, so Hercules was tasked by a king to basically, you know, undergo 12 labors and he achieved them and then that's it. Like that'd be pretty boring. But you go through and you tell that story in a riveting manner. You tell it in an intriguing way, which I might do an audiobook on. In turn, it becomes grandiose. It becomes fantastic. You tell the story of Treasure Island, right? Like, I told you guys a story, like, well, at least we ran into the first part of Treasure Island, but I tell you guys a story about Treasure Island, right? I say, okay, so there was like this guy named Jim Hawkins. He was like a teenage kid, and he ran a bed and breakfast with his mom and dad, then his dad died, and like this weird guy shows up, and he's like, hey, I'll stay here for a little while, then he stopped paying. And then one day, like, another dude shows up looking for the first guy, you know, and then like they meet, and like a sword fight ensues, and then like the black dog guy runs off, and then the guy who originally showed up is just kind of like, oh, do they? I mean, you could go through like in a really boring way, but then what if I tell you that story in a much far more intriguing way, right? Like, what if I pick up from the last part that we told? And I say, okay, so like, here's a crazy thing, right? So like, so like Jim Hawkins and all them, like Dr. Livesey and like Squire Trelawney, they end up like finally getting this like schooner called the Hispaniola. And like they bring on this guy, you know, Captain Smollett, you know, and like there's this parrot, you know, that just shouts pieces of eight all the time. But like the crazy thing is they hire this cook, this one-legged cook named Long John Silver, right? Like Long John Silver like orchestrates this mutiny. And literally like by this mutiny, like by the time they get to Treasure Island, like Jim Hawkins jumps off the ship around the time the mutiny happens, right? Like, it's just like, I gotta get out of here, running through the woods, finds this guy, Ben Gunn, crazy asshole who's obsessed with cheese. Craziest thing in the world, right? Ben Gunn's just like, hey man, do you have any cheese? Like, do you have some cheese? You know, I mean, like you could tell a story in a riveting and an interesting way to a point where like it amps people up and it drives them to be interesting. And that's the nature of storytelling. That's the basis behind telling a story. Tell it in such a way that people are intrigued, that it's almost like you're telling it like you could draw a crowd of people in. right? Like imagine it as though, like, if you're gonna tell a story, imagine yourself telling the story in a way that you were like in an amphitheater, right? Like, what was it, the episode of House, 3 stories, right? Like Dr. Gregory House is telling the story about these 3 patients. And when the episode first starts off, like he's in this sort of lecture hall talking to these kids in this class, and there's like only there's a smattering of kids there, maybe like 20. By the time the episode ends, the whole hall is full up, because the entire basis behind the 3 stories episode is the origin of how Gregory House ended up, injuring his leg. Like, why does he walk around with a cane and pops Vicodin all the time? But the story is intriguing because people like the character of Gregory House and they want to know what in the world was going on. That you have to imagine you telling your story follows in that fashion. You start telling it to people and there's like 3 people who are listening. And by the time you get done, there's like 50 people who are listening, people who are just walking about their day and stop and have to listen to what you're saying because it's so captivating and so riveting and so intriguing, right? So for me as a person, when I tell stories, I let my personality shine through. Now I'm super ADD, right? Like anybody who knows me, you guys know from watching videos, I'm super ADD. I go off on tangents all the time, right? Like I'll be in the middle of talking about something and like veer all the way off to that direction and then eventually circle back, making a couple stops along the way, and then we're back on topic again. It's the nature of my personality. It's who I am. I don't really hide that. I mean, there are a few people in the comments who complain, but whatever, they'll be fine. So like, it's the nature of how I tell stories. So to tell the story about Sloane, right? Like Sloane and Peaches. Now here's the crazy thing. In high school, Sloane was fearless, right? Like this guy had no fear whatsoever. Like this guy was just kind of like, hey, like, whatever, like the worst case that happens is that I fail. We used to cheat on tests in high school because Sloane was just like, whatever, man, whatever happens, happens, and just calling it a day. There was this girl in our junior English class named Roxanne. She had long brown hair. She was super hot. Like Sloane hits on her in like what I consider to be like the most brazen way possible, right? Like we're sitting in class and Sloane looks over at her, like before class starts, he looks over, he's like, hey, what's going on, Roxanne? She's like, what's up? And he's like, how about you come sit on my lap? We can talk about the first thing that pops up. Now, Roxanne had a boyfriend. I firmly believe to this day, if she didn't, dude, Sloane would have been knocking boots with that, and they would have been dating. Dude, he would have hit that more than a few times, because they lived in the same neighborhood, I think. And so it was like, okay, he could have pulled that off. Anyway, one day Sloane shows up to class with a stuffed dog named Peaches, and carries it around school the whole time. Dude, chicks loved it, man. Oh, it was the craziest damn thing I ever saw in my life. Chicks loved it. They were just like, oh, your dog is so cute, your dog's so adorable, and like they would pet it and so on and so forth. And like he would talk to them through Peaches, like, hey, Peaches wants to know if you want to go out Friday night. Dude got so many girls' numbers off of Peaches, man. Dude, it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen in my life. So Sloane decides to step it up, right? Because like when you're in high school, that's training wheels for like getting out into the world and like catching some big fish, right? Like catching like wild women out there in the world. Like that's what high school is about. High school is a controlled environment. Like, hey, like I've been going to school with them for like the last 3 years. So like I'll hit on her my senior year or hit on her, or something along those lines. But then like when you're out there in the world, it's just like, hey, so there's that chick I just saw. Let's go ask her out, right? Like it's, a wild hot girl up here. So like you gotta go for it. So Sloane, we all ended up going to Hooters. And it was somebody's birthday. I can't remember who it was, but it was myself, Sloane, and Paulus. And then like Sloane brings Peaches in. Peaches is like, she's sitting in the 4th chair. And so like the Hooters waitress comes over, and Sloane is like the Hooters waitress is like, hey, what's going on, guys? What do you guys want to drink? I'm like a Diet Coke or something like that. And then she looks over at Peaches and she's like, what's up with that? And Sloane's like, oh, that's Peaches, that's my dog, don't worry about her. And the waitress thinks it's kind of cute, right? So to Sloane, because he's like, okay, so like she's into it. Like she's into the stuffed dog. She thinks it's kind of cute. And it's kind of one of those funny things, right? It's like Fallout 3, right? Like when you use the aiming system or whatever it is, and it's like everything freezes and then it tells you like what your chance of probability is on like hitting it, on like hitting the head or something like that. It's like Sloane was like analyzing that, like, okay, what are the chances of my probability on like hitting it? Like getting with that Hooters waitress tonight. Like what are my chances on that? So it's like he goes through and analyzes. You can see the numbers just like cranking around in his head, right? And it's like, oh my God, dude, Sloane's gonna go for it. And so he's like, what's that, Peaches? And then he looks up, he's like, Peaches wants to know if she can have your number. And the waitress looks, the look on the waitress's face, right? The look on the waitress's face, I'll never forget this. Look on her face is one half like, did this clown really just do that? And then on the other half, just kind of like, but that's brazen though. But that's ballsy though. Like, okay, I can give him some points for being brave. And so like the waitress kind of laughs it off for a second. She's like, well, I don't think my boyfriend would be too happy about me, giving my number out, which I understand. Let me tell you something, man. Like if Mariah gave her number out to a random guy, I would hit the roof. I would be like, what the hell's going on right now? Like, you and me are having a conversation, and it's probably gonna be a conversation you're not gonna like, but it's gonna be one that we need to have. And like I understand like where she was where she was coming from, or where her boyfriend would be coming from. But Sloan, brazen ass Sloan, looks back. What's that, Peaches? And then looks back at her and says, and with a straight face, all right? It's true. It's true. With a straight face, looks at this waitress and says, your boyfriend doesn't have to know. And I was like, dude, are you serious, man? Like, and okay, here's the thing, man. Like, the look on her face when he said that, like, he had won her over, right? Like, she was walking the knife's edge of like, should I give this random high school kid my number? Like, what's gonna happen out of this? You know, but then like when he made that line, I was like, holy shit, dude, that's like the most ballsy thing. Now, I was in high school at the time, right? So I was a lot less confident than I am now. Nowadays, like, I would probably say some shit like that. But like back then, like I never would have done anything like that. Like, I would have just been like I never would have had the balls to make the move in the first place. But like she's looking at him and it's like, okay, like I remember this. I was like, if she didn't have a boyfriend, she would have given Sloan her number. Dude, I guarantee it. And she wasn't bad looking either. I mean, granted, this is 20 years ago, so, you know, I remember her being kind of hot. And Hooters doesn't hire ugly chicks. So, like, you know, she had to have been good looking. So it was like, okay, you know, but dude, I to this day, it's like one of the most brazen stories that I remember about Sloan. Just like the stuff that he would pull, because he just didn't care, man. Like Sloan, like he had it together, man. Like Sloan, he ended up marrying this beautiful woman named Agia. They actually met when they worked at Domino's. He was a delivery driver and she was a manager. And they met, they started dating. I want to say that he had quit by that point in time, but they had started dating. And they dated for a little while. And then like shortly after 2008, so probably going into like 2011, 2012, when the housing market really bottomed out, Sloan just bought like a ton of properties in Lexington and just started renting them all out. And he and Agia got married and they've got a couple kids, I think. I don't know exactly what he's doing now, but they had a couple kids. I think he's still doing the real estate thing, but I'm not sure. Haven't talked to Sloan in quite some time. I haven't talked to him in a number of years, but yeah, it was brazen, man. Oh my God, it was ballsy. And it was amazing because it was like, okay, whatever, man, like Sloan, you do your thing. But you guys understand what I'm talking about the nature of telling stories, right? Like telling stories in an interesting and intriguing way. So anyway, guys, with that being said, we're gonna bring this video to an end. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.